Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here again. It's been 3 months since we got together to start working on the Kaiser of Atlantis, which we all performed in Atlanta in the big tent on a baseball field during a pandemic.
Truth.
All right. Just
Next
in case,
card.
just in case nobody knows who we are, I'm Alek Shrader, and your co-host for this wonderful event is...
I'm Kevin Burdette.
And then I'm going to go down the line here of screens, which is Calvin Griffin, Vuski, a.k.a. Brian Vu, Danny, a.k.a. Daniela Mack, Jasmine Habersham, Nathan Munson, Michael Mays, Clinton Smith, and that's it.
Hey, Mike, are you trying to communicate?
His sound is out.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, you know, cool is right.
We'll fix it in post. So, right, I'm gonna pass it to you, Mr. Kevin Burdette, because I would love for you to tell us what the heck the Kaiser of Atlantis is about.
I'm glad you asked me that, Alek. So yeah, I've been thinking about that since you sent around this outline of stuff we're going to talk about on the roundtable, and I was thinking about sort of, what's the drama of it, and I think the drama of it, like what is drama anyway? And I think it's tension, right? And what's the tension of the piece? To me, the tension of the piece is one of the temporal versus the eternal. How one views life. Ullmann wrote an essay called Goethe and the Ghetto in 1944, about a year after he'd written the opera, and he quoted, Ullmann quoted Goethe, and he said one of Goethe's maxims was live within the moment, but also live in eternity. And that tension between living in the moment, living with the material burden of life imposed on you, versus being a part of something bigger, having something in you that has preceded you and will continue after you. That is the tension of the piece. In fact, I think the structural apex of the piece might very well be when the girl and the soldier put down arms and say, we're not going to fight, we're going to love, and they become part of something bigger than just the material burden of life. So I think basically that's the point of the opera, in my opinion. I think it's reflected in the title of the opera, which is two different things. It's the Emperor of Atlantis, which is a temporal, the emperor, this tyrant, who has created this world of this material world of burden. But you also have death. Two different titles have had, two other subtitles that have involved death. The death abdicates or death resists, and death, of course, is at a transcendent level. So I think that's the point of the opera, the drama of the opera. I think Calvin, as the Lautstreffen says at the beginning, he says, the first scene starts irgendwo. The first scene starts anywhere. And so the anywhere, to me, shows me that Ullmann is leaning into the eternal. The story could take place anywhere, and we're starting in the eternal space, because Ullmann loved art and he loved poetry, and he relied on that when he was composing at Theresienstadt. And so he starts in this place of the eternal, and he starts with Tod, a personification of death, and he starts with Harlequin, a personification arguably of life, and they go from there. And I think that's the drama of the story. Speaking of Harlequin, it says death and Harlequin. I'm going to ramble on one more second. Death and Harlequin sit in Ausbedingung, which means they've been put out to pasture. But it also means in German, it has something to do with an inheritance. Like when you have something and you're passing it on to your progeny, but you put conditions on it so that they can only do so much with it when inheriting it. And that's what Death and Harlequin are doing. They are giving this world, this temporal world, to the emperor, but they have set conditions on it. And it's those conditions that drive the drama of the piece. I have a question for you, Alek, after all that, if you're still awake. Wake up! Which is, I note, if you will, that Harlequin is a clown. So I'm interested to hear if Harlequin is indeed a clown. Why did they not hire someone funny to perform it?
Excellent question. Excellent question. First of all, if you want to, do you want to join me now in doing this, or did you want to do it later? We have remnants of the piece. And so I think that's all you need is the visual, and you're ready to go. Well, I think for comedy especially, you can't please all the people all the time. And I'm glad you mentioned the word tension, because a joke is based on tension. There's a setup and there's a punchline, but how will we arrive at the punchline? That's where the craft comes into it. And I think, comedy is also experimental, and the best we can do is read the room while we're rehearsing and fine tune our jokes so that when we show them to the audience, they laugh. And I think it's just a matter of team spirit in a way. We have to get on the same page, tell the same story. And that was tricky, especially when we're starting with this thing that can be anywhere, and we can definitely be open to interpretation, many interpretations in the same rehearsal, and we got on the same page, but it was not instant. There were many discussions about what story we were telling and how we were going to tell it, but I think we got there. And I also think that, and maybe this is, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, I think that there are still several interpretations from the audience perspective that are all different and yet all valid, and they all saw the same show. I'm going to leave that there. Yeah, so there you have it. Cut it.
I like that. Did you play a specific clown? Was there anything like, was it like, I'm playing Death, capital D, and arguably maybe were you playing a capital C clown, any clown, or were there specific moments you were a clown or a different clown?
Yes, this look is Emmett Kelly based, a famous modern era clown, and we did incorporate some of his routines. We had the broom, we swept up the spotlight. We did a few other nods where he used to balance a feather on his nose. We changed it to a flower. All those were sort of homage to that specific clown. Harlequin is also called, in a different version of the libretto, he's called Pierrot specifically at one point. So we sort of walked the line with his identity to be both specific and universal, as he is, and I totally agree, the embodiment of life and laughter and even art.
But I love that, because that goes back to what we were just talking about, the tension, the duality of being an Emmett Kelly in this moment, but also a clown and a capital L laughter or capital L life. I like that. So we're talking about these constructs. Do you have other, what else, what other constructs are going away from the clowning and going on to other aspects of the show? Lead us into other constructs here in the show, please, Alek Shrader.
Yes, I would love to. Another construct that I would like to mention is the idea of propaganda, and a construct that is created by the temporal, by the emperor, and but yet affects all living creatures. And so with that said, I would like to introduce the drummer, who was portrayed by the incredible, wonderful, transcendent, just inimitable Daniela Mack. And so I have a few questions. The first thing I would like to ask you, do you know of anyone who has been hypnotized, brainwashed by propaganda? Is that still a thing?
Do I know of anyone? Yes, sure. Fortunately, I personally don't know anyone who's been actually hypnotized by propaganda. But I think, of course, there is no shortage of examples, both throughout history and in our current society, of a vast number of people who have been fed certain ideas and false facts and lies and, you know, things that lead to harmful actions. So this was certainly the case, I think, when this piece was conceived and when it was composed. And sadly, I don't think that we as a society have evolved that much, because it's still something that you'd be hard pressed to turn on the TV or to open your phone to social media and not find evidence of this going on right now. So, yes.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to take a hard left turn now and ask you, what is the overall net outcome of performing with one's spouse? And you may submit a list of pros.
That was a hard left. That has zero to do with Kaiser.
But it's a little propaganda-y.
Oh man, so much could go on this list. Honestly, I love performing with my spouse. I think we have been singing together for the past 15 years. Is that right? 15-ish years. And there's just this wonderful level of comfort that exists between us, so that we can pretty much, we know what the other one is going to do. There are, of course, moments of surprise, and Alek, you know, thinks on his feet a lot as a performer, and he does surprise me every day with something in one way or other. And when we're on stage, those are the sort of magical, sparkly moments when I look over at him and he's doing something ridiculous and I have a little chuckle. But
so you do admit that Alek is funny?
I will not admit that publicly,
Okay.
but I enjoy performing together very much.
I thought it was, I have never seen more real acting in my life than when you looked over to Alek one point and told him to shut up because you were trying to talk about the Kaiser. And I was
That
like,
wasn't acting.
There's a real story in there that I feel. I don't know where it
There
comes
is a
from.
real story. You know, the other side of, like, you know, having that little magic and looking over is we know where the line is, and he can look at me and he'll be doing something ridiculous, and based on the expression on my face, he will either continue in that direction or absolutely stop. And you know, you don't always know with someone you just met where that line is, but it exists.
Did y'all meet at a gig?
We did. We met doing a Cenerentola.
I love it. You'd be a beautiful Magnifico, Alek.
Thank you. Thank you. If I could think of any of his music, I would quote it right now. Kevin, do you want to?
Magnifico.
Can I pass the torch to you?
Pass away.
Can we return
Are you gonna do it,
to the creation of
are you
the
gonna
piece?
prompt it, or are you just gonna pass it? Say again?
I'm just gonna pass it like that. Tag.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump in. Thank you, Danny. That was fascinating. It felt a little bit forced at times, the compliments, but the rest of it was fascinating. I will talk just briefly about the creation of the piece as just a little background. I'll say it was written in Theresienstadt, which was a hybrid concentration camp / ghetto, a transit camp, a stopover spot basically for trains heading east to the killing centers. So that's where it was written, and there's really no, you can't parallel the atrocities. There's no parallel to the atrocities of the Holocaust. And so it's hard to sort of, I am loath to sort of show anything about our creation of the piece that is at all similar to that, but I can talk about how we paid homage in our production to that creation. First, I'll say early on in our, before we even started rehearsing, we had that meeting with the head of the Bremen Museum. And he talked about how the Bremen Museum views the Holocaust through the lens of the 4 R's, which were resilience and resistance and rescue and resourcefulness. And I think that our production in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic certainly did honor to that lens of the 4Rs, of the resourcefulness and the resilience and the resistance and the rescue. Ullmann talked about, Ullmann was very prolific when he was in Theresienstadt, much more prolific at Theresienstadt than prior. He had a lot more musical output, and he talked about that in one of his letters, saying how the form of creating helped sort of annihilate, per Schiller, the burden of material life. And I found that fascinating, and I think that, to me, was one of the most amazing things about our production, is that it gave a form to us. It gave a form literally to a baseball field. A tent went up, and there was form there. It gave a form to our existences, which to that point of the pandemic, at least for me, were very amorphous and amoeboid. To have that structure, to have that form, was invigorating. It was life-giving. And I believe, and the performances also gave a certain form, a certain structure to the audiences, something to look forward to, something to, like, an actual thing to do and a bit of life to experience. I had a cousin who went to one of the shows, and she came back afterwards and thanked Tomer, the head of the company. Y'all may not know that, but I'm letting you know now. Tomer runs the company. And she thanked Tomer for doing it. She said, for me, as an audience member, this was something I got to look forward to, because otherwise, every day is Taga Taga Verkauf Taga, which is a duet from the opera. It's like every day, one day is just like the other. And so I think giving that structure, giving that form to our lives and to the Atlanta community, in a sense, was an homage to the original creation of the piece. Did any of that? That was long.
That was beautiful.
Long. Oh, I have another thing. Thank you. That's like at a big level, but like at a more granular level, I think we did homage. And there's one gesture I loved that I think was inspired by Meg Marino, talking about performing with spouses. Mike Mays, who is in mine, I guess he's Jan Brady in my Brady bunch right here, in my square of Brady bunches. So Jan down there, he and his wife are both company players also, and we're able to work together at least in one of the concerts, right, Mike?
Yeah, we were up in the Crossroads concert. Yeah.
Yeah, in the Crossroads concert. So and Meg came up. We were running in rep. Kaiser was running in rep with Pagliacci, and Meg came up with the idea of doing Mac the Knife before Pagliacci. And so we ended up doing that, and I think it actually ended up being a great homage to Kaiser in one specific way, in multiple ways. But the one I'm thinking of is the opening of the piece. Ba bam ba bam, hello hello. Those two tritones right after each other were known in the Czech modern society, which Ullmann was a part of, as being the death motif. That was a death motif going back to an earlier piece called Azrael. And so people at Theresian would have known that sound, would have recognized that as being death, and knowing that this is the beginning of, this show was starting with a death motif. Fast forward to 2020, we would not know that. However, you would know it in our show, because Death showed up with a mask on and played the deathly violin and played bam, 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 played a song that is all about death. And so it cued the audience in its own way, that this is a piece that involves death and it involves life, both in the temporal and the eternal. And I think that was a nice homage to the original piece. And speaking of hello, hi, Calvin.
Hello. It's twice. Say it twice.
Hello, hello.
There we are. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, Calvin, whom I've known for a very long time, the most luxurious studio player casting, the history of studio player casting, was the Lautsprecher. Tell me, Calvin. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot. But was there does that historical context that I just rambled on and on about, did that inform your study of the piece or your performance of the piece? I don't know. I just rambled on, and that whole pile of crap. Did you find any kernels of corn you can talk about?
I certainly did. Yeah. So the Lautsprecher, well, in our production at the beginning, he's sort of the circus master, but then in the show, he embodies a number of different people, but specifically different members of the Kaiser's army, like the general, the doctor. And I mean, seeing as Ullmann wrote this during the Holocaust, that would have been Hitler's army. So I tried to sort of embody that character for all of those scenes. And then a little, if we take it out of actual history, for the circus master at the beginning, I was embodying more of Hugh Jackman in The Greatest Showman as Barnum and Bailey. But yes, answer yes.
I love it. I like that. And it showed. Hey. I have a question for Mike Mays, the Emperor of Atlantis. Check out this chestnut Michael Mays in the book, Opera, The Art of Dying, which you should read based on your trajectory with characters, which tend, as I understand it, to die. The authors wrote that everyone who writes about this opera, The Emperor of Atlantis, inevitably feels, as we do, intimidated by its history. Everyone also agrees that its very existence is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I'll query if she said everyone who writes about this opera is intimidated by its history. Do you think that applies to us as singers, like if we're performing this piece? I don't know. I feel like it might, but I'm not sure. Certainly the testament to the human spirit. What do you think, Michael Mays? And another thing you could do is say, that question makes no sense, but I'd like to talk about this.
Well, I mean, with anything like that, I mean, we are all, as opera singers, there's a rich history that spans centuries, and all of the stories that we tell have a rich historical context, and they're often based on historical events, whether it implicitly or explicitly. And so you can't, there's often this struggle for me as someone who, I was I didn't even know what opera was till I got to college. It's not something I grew up on. That's a common story of a lot of us in this business. But there is a natural sort of intimidation when you come to something that's so sort of culturally distant from your own experience. And it's always intimidating. And for me, like, whenever I do pieces like this, there's almost this wall that I put up between the weight of that history and what I'm trying to do. Because for me, whenever I'm telling any story, I'm trying to make that character as vibrant and as real and as close to something that somebody could relate to as possible. So while the historical context is fantastic for informing, the sort of academic side of what we do, the emotional side of what we do, for me, is often where I spend most of my time. And so, for instance, the character of Emperor Overall, it's a dangerous game to play when you humanize monsters. But for me, those are always the interesting stories. It's the classic storyline of a human, seeing a humanity in a monster, or the monstrosity in a human. And so, for me, like, trying to find this character and trying to find his emotional landscape, fortunate's the wrong word, but it was apropos that we were all in the midst of a plague, still are in the midst of a plague, that has, for all of us, has taken and cut off a lot of our trajectories. Something that we have spent our lifetimes working on and designing and taking care of, and seeing the field and the future and what you have planned and all the grand plans that we all have, seeing all of those grand plans be laid waste by this pandemic, which is a similar experience that Overall had. And so that, for me, was where I drew a lot of the emotional sort of painting of this guy. Was, while I can't understand what it's like to be a dictator, or to be someone who wants pain and death, or wants to exterminate the human race. I can't really relate to that, but I can relate to the idea that you have had something that you've invested your entire being in. We do invest our whole lives, and this isn't a job. It's not even a career to me. It's a lifestyle, and so we are so close to jobs and seeing all of the stuff. I mean, not just personally, but just in a sort of industry-wide sense, seeing all of the best laid plans laid to waste, and then having to figure out what that means for your life, and that's a devastating moment for everybody that we know. And so for me, playing Overall, that was that thing I really was always ever present for me, was this sense of mourning for having lost this grand plan, this grand idea that we all ascribed to for decades. It was that sort of sense of loss and defeat was always there underlying for everything I did, especially that last aria. It's like, and it's a hard thing to do. I mean, with masks and stuff, half of our storytelling is gone. And we're also singing to an American audience in German, so they're not going to really, they're having to read it and stuff. So, it's just particularly challenging. I mean, it was a gift that we had those boxes for those of us that had those boxes, because we were able to tell a more, sort of explicit story with our bodies and our faces. The second you had to put the mask on, it changed everything about how you communicated with your audience, and it's to the extent that I think there was one review that totally missed the point of what I was trying to do. But
yeah,
it would seem they really only had the body mask and the text on the super titles to go from. They couldn't see anything below here. So it was just it was super challenging. But
I love that. That's extremely compelling. And I would say, I don't know, I trust you on the review thing, but I'll say, if you're telling a story from your center, if you're acting from your center and telling that story, at the end of the day, it's hard. Whoever there, I don't know what review that was.
It wasn't like outrageous. It was just like a little point, and I was like, "Oh, that's not what I was trying to say."
But but they knew you were saying something, and it was clear to them. Whatever you were saying, they felt it, and just because they heard a different story, they're the protagonist of their own story. Mm-hmm. That you were telling it compellingly to them, it almost didn't matter. It hurt. It's frustrating. But as an actor, it's like it's nice to know that they heard a story at all. If that makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. That's fascinating, Mike. I think two takeaways. Well, John, what I said, one interesting takeaway is that you went to college, which is super surprising to me.
Yeah, shocks everybody.
But
state school though, nothing private.
But that's cool. That's cool. But no, that's it's a fascinating lesson on how to play. How do you play the King of Crete? How do you play a Kaiser? Like that, it's a lesson. I don't know. Like Alec, you have a gig coming up where you're playing a bad guy too. I think it's interesting to hear how not bad guys dive into the skin of a bad guy.
I never said I wasn't a bad guy.
But say again.
I never said I wasn't a bad guy.
Fair enough. Don't put words in my mouth. That's right. And another thing, you talked about the masks. I want to hear more about the masks, which is to say the safety protocols, etc. Alec, what do you think about that?
Yes, I want to talk about our safety protocols and doing love scenes with protection. So that said, I would love to reintroduce our lovely Jasmine, Brian, and Nathan, who were the girl, aka Bubikov, and our soldiers. And I would like to ask you all, do you still have your rehearsal masks?
Yes. Oh, our rehearsal mask. No.
Oh, that's a good one.
No.
I could have grabbed mine before I left. I didn't think about it.
Do you remember that?
Mallard.
I steal everything, you guys. I always have something from a production. I have several things from this one. I paid for this, but the other stuff, if they want it back, they'll tell me, right? So no, you didn't.
They will now.
Yeah.
Oh, don't tell anybody.
Your plan has a flaw.
Did these impact your rehearsal process in any way? Did they get in your way singing?
100%. That mask especially, I think, is the worst of all of the masks we had to use. Just because I feel like everybody, I could chime in if you agree or disagree. To some extent, whatever mask you're wearing, whether it's surgical, cloth, or KN95, I felt like it restricts your lower jaw just like ever so slightly, to where in addition to cutting off your storytelling, you're also readjusting, like, technically, real time. And that duckbill mask that you just showed, Alec, which, like, love the safety protocol of having us use a singer mask in rehearsal, but that was the worst culprit for really constricting your jaw and just, like, putting some sort of clamp on your face, because there's metal wiring that the viewer cannot see that is in that mask, to secure it on your face so much to where it's a challenge to sing in.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I completely agree with you, Brian, because I think a lot of it too, especially coming from the back, I was getting really tight and I was like, wait a minute, why am I like tired all of a sudden? So we did have to kind of readjust and figure out, how does that feel to sing in a mask? It was completely different than, of course, not having one. But for me, I think the KN95 was the best one.
Agreed.
In my opinion. But
Same.
I
think eventually we all switched to K95s in the show, didn't we?
yes.
Yeah.
I never used the KN95 really in rehearsal or the show. But I'm using it now for this show I'm in. And you guys talking about it restricting your jaw. And, for some people, that's a drawback. But for people like me, I've got really serious TMJ. And I was working the other day, I was like, holy crap, like my sound is so much freer because I'm not trying to, because I got this crazy like jaw. So,
yeah. So we had a bunch of, besides masks, we had other things in place. We had safety protocols. We were distant. We had our plastic booths that we built. We couldn't even pass props to each other. We couldn't hand off props. So obviously those things were challenges in the performance that you all beautifully overcame. Were there any violations to the safety protocols that you were aware of during the production?
Nathan, chime in with me. Did you use the same fingerless gloves that I did?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess technically Nathan and I violated protocol by touching Jasmine's hand with our bare fingers, because our lovely COVID-19 safety coordinator explicitly told us, if you touch your scene partner's hand, you have to be fully gloved. But we weren't.
Yeah, and I did have full gloves on, so maybe that's why they made the exception. I don't know, but yeah, that is true. That didn't happen.
We were all basically bathing in Purell. There were Purell stations everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It did make for an interesting moment in the opera when you actually touch another human being for the first time. That was really unique, and it felt almost jarring when it actually happened.
I'm sure for the audience as well.
This is me. It felt jarring to touch somebody. After living in pandemic life for however many months, not touching people outside of your family, to actually touch somebody is really shocking.
That's one of the hardest things for me is we live, unlike lawyers or accountants or business people, there's a much more acceptable level of interpersonal affection in our business because of just the nature of what we do. And it's always been really great for me, because especially when we spend most of our lives on the road and alone, that when you go into a rehearsal situation, a performance situation, there's a lot of hugging and touching and, kind of physical contact that, not only is it help bond you as just human beings, but as castmates people that are on the same ship. And it's like, I really miss that. I mean, even today, like I miss that aspect of affection that we have with each other. You know, I mean, I have never seen, you know, Kevin in person when I hadn't reached up and just give him a hug. You know, we worked together a few times, and it's just not being able to do that, and it was this constant feeling, and maybe it heightened the tension on stage and between each other because we didn't have that. You know, it was just this longing to do that.
Oh, that's interesting.
But, yeah.
I love that. That's a great point, Mike. Like, you know, we have acting class. I start acting class out with people that you work with, touch it, like you touch them, like you learn how to get, you want to be comfortable with the other, like just from day one. How do you lean against each other physically so that you can lean against each other metaphorically? And it's a great point, Mike, that it's without that, it's harder to, I don't know, it's just harder to tell that story. It's a good point, Mike.
Yeah.
The challenges of love in the time of COVID. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to say that, but I said it. Love in the time of COVID. But I want to talk more about death. Let's talk about death some more. So Kevin, please explain something. Please, wait a minute. So death is the good guy of this story?
I know. It's hard to believe.
I thought death was scary.
Maths like this.
Right? There we go. See, I thought death was scary.
Yeah. You know, that's the thing. Not in this one, I don't think. Like, I see death as death's second aria. I want to answer that is what I want to do. But I want to go back real fast to what Nathan said. When you said, talk about touching and how it was shocking to you, I bet it also was shocking and hopefully somehow cathartic to the audience. Because, you know, after months of, no art form is more driven by touch than the art form of connecting, than the art form that started with Orpheus and Eurydice just wanting to look at each other. And Pamina and Tamino just really wanting to walk through fire together. And so I think what people have missed in pandemic, performers and audience alike, is the connection. And to have that connection, I think I'm glad you said that it was visceral for you, because I suspect it was visceral for the audience as well.
Well, what I found out from talking to people who had gone to the show performances after the fact is they said that was the most relieving part of the opera, which is unusual because usually you have a serious opera, you have comedic relief, and this time we had love relief, and it's very stark when you compare it to what you're used to and to what actually happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would agree.
Those two bings were 2 points. You have 2 points now. Bing, bing.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with Nathan. I kind of felt like, especially that moment, actually that entire scene was kind of like stepping into like Wizard of Oz, where it was like black and white and then there was color. And I think that's how people got that sense of calm and, like you said, relief of feeling like, okay, this is how it should be, you know.
I love that. And I think looking back on it, I was looking at the structure of the piece recently, and I know it's a picture and it's an opera in 4 pictures. But if you argue, which I would, that the last picture, which involves Your Lullaby, Alec, and then the trio, and I'm probably dropping something out, and I have an aria. Mike has his farewell aria, and then we have a finale. That's a really big build. If you can maybe say a picture. If you could cabin maybe at least the epilogue out as a 5th, then it's an arc of 5 scenes. And right in the middle is that 3rd scene where the 2 lovers come together. And right in the middle of that scene, it's when they stop fighting and they come together. And that is the apex, I think, of the structure of the piece. It's like and I wonder, I'm probably wrong, if it's not like a portrait of the artist, where you have the artist and you have the space and you have that liminal thing right in the middle with the high point, and then the space in the picture, and then the artist again. And you see how a lot of I think some of the piece is structured like that. I have an aria before that moment and after that moment. Those arias are very different. Mike, you have that aria before the moment of their touching, when you're saying, you know, oh, I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to turn it around. And you sing Deutschland über alles. You reference Deutschland über alles. But at the end, the farewell is very, very different. as a different style. Even the dances of death are different. Anyway, I contend that moment of touch might just be, with all the talk of the temporal and the eternal and death and Kaiser, the actual high point is when the two people go from fighting to love. I wonder. Anyway, that was long. I'm sorry. There will be a quiz on this at the end. Yeah, Death's not a bad guy in this one. Death in my second aria, in the picture of the artist at the end, you know what I mean? After the high point, Death reveals, I am comfort. I'm release from pain. I am not pain. I am freedom from the plague. I am not the plague. And I find that fascinating. I found out Ullmann's Opus number 3 is a song called Abendlied, and it's based on a poem by Matthias Claudius, and who is he's son of a Lutheran minister. And Claudius was obsessed with death as comfort. He always calls death sanfte Tod. And Claudius also wrote Der Tod das Mädchen, the Schubert, the poem for the Schubert song, where Tod says, "So sanft in meine Arme schlafen," you're going to rest comfortably in my arms. And at the end of Mike's farewell aria, the libretto actually says, Tod takes the Kaiser's hand sanftlich, like he's taking it comfortably in his hands. So to Ullmann, he viewed death, whether, I don't know if it was because of the time, because of the material burden of being where he was, or if it precedes that, but I think he viewed death as comfort, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's just my take on it. That's
I love your take.
They're told us to
I love your take on it. Your take is perfect. But, you know, so the tirelessness, the inevitability of death is key to the piece, obviously. And with that tirelessness, how did you find the energy to do what you did facing unemployment, political unrest, the pandemic, not to mention being the father of 2 incredible kids? How did you have time to invest yourself into a role like this, into a production like this?
I did them all pretty poorly, but then I blamed them on each other. I was like, why are you such a bad dad? Because I'm performing. Why do you sound so terrible? Because I'm a dad. I'll say, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to go there again. This Goethe and Ghetto essay that Ullmann wrote, which is fascinating. He wrote at one point, basically, our desire for art equaled our desire for life. And to me, that's incredibly compelling in the context of when he wrote it. But it's also, like I say, and an homage to that, like our desire for art, my desire for art equaled my desire for life. My art, as Mike just said 20 minutes ago before I started rambling on, but it's not just a job, it's a lifestyle. And so it's symbiotic, I guess, or synergistic. The fact that all the other things I was doing, I was better at, I was happier doing, because my desire for art equaled my desire for life, by being able to vibrate with other people and do a deep dive into this incredible score, and to, I don't know, even just drive up and see that tent on the field. All of that gave me life, if that makes any sense.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's all I got for you.
I don't know, like there's something you mentioned the other day, and there's probably a perverse side to that. I don't know what y'all think. There might be a perverse side to that our desire for art equaled our desire for life, at least right now in a pandemic. That, you know, people you do the cost-benefit analysis and you decide, you made this point, Alec, but I'm going to steal it. That, you know, you decide where on the scale of cost-benefit analysis it falls that you want to go out. I am going to go to see the show, and I think the safety protocols will be good, but like my desire for art is so big that I'm willing to balance, take the risks to do it. Or maybe it's not just art, maybe it's, you know, a hairstyle, or, you know, a barbecue, or whatever it is. I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
How risky are we? How risky are we willing to be for our art, or for our culture, for our entertainment, for whatever's important? What's the risk analysis, right?
You know,
Yeah,
I
right.
feel like this goes back to what Mike said about just like the thing that we miss the most in the rehearsal room is the hugs and the human contact. And I think that's the same with every other aspect about life pre-pandemic. How much did we miss going to get a haircut? How much did we miss going out with our friends? And with that being said, weighing it for ourselves, like, am I willing to take that risk to go see a show at the Big Tent? I know there are safety protocols, but the risk of contracting something is there. So yeah, I think everybody has a different risk tolerance. I am an extrovert, so I missed everything about pre-pandemic life, going out to the bar, the club, hanging out with my castmates after the show. I think it was heartbreaking that you know, it
Yeah.
was inappropriate for us to celebrate with each other after opening night. Yeah, I guess all of that to say, I have a medium risk level for myself.
And
That's
I
fair.
feel like we've lost so many friendships and incidental relationships that sort of filled out the canvas of our lives. I mean, it's the same reason why people will risk when you have the ability to have your groceries delivered, the ability to make your own coffee, all, you know, drink at home and all that stuff. They will risk that because they need
Yeah.
to have that relation with people. And one of the most interesting things for me about this pandemic and the ensuing political discord, you know, theater and group catharsis are the remedy for the things that separate us. Being able to be with people and experience things together, that builds empathy. And so it felt almost like, you know, yeah, it's a risk, but it's a charge, it's a commission, because people need these experiences. Not only us as artists, but the audience themselves need to have that ability to experience something together and draw their own conclusions. But, you know, if you go see a fantastic opera, you will talk to complete strangers at the bar or in the men's room or out in front of the theater about what you felt about that. Same thing with straight theater, with musicals, with concerts, because we're not the only ones who, I mean, regular old workaday musicians lost all of their gigs too. Even movie theaters. You'll go to a movie theater and talk to a complete stranger. Wasn't that great? And, you know, you go to a movie theater and everybody claps even though there's no one to hear the clapping. You know, it's for me, I think it's ironic that one of the cures for the things that are plaguing our society right now is one of the things that we're barred from doing at a you know, a rate that would need to be done. You know?
I buy it. It's a good point. I am going to, Clinton, I wish you'd be quiet, but I'm going to ask you one more question. Oh, wait. Hey, Maestro, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm really enjoying this. I'm thinking, as I'm hearing answers, I'm thinking through my experiences during the pandemic and how people are so desperate for art and release and community. And just a small scale example, in my neighborhood, people started giving little concerts on their front lawns for, you know, because people were constantly on their therapy walks, you know, in the neighborhood. And so they set up on our neighborhood website this like, you know, time frame that it would be this like music couple hours on Friday afternoons. And they did that for weeks. And it was a really cool thing. People would open their windows or sit on their front yard. So I totally agree. I mean, in any form, people are looking for community and a shared experience.
I love that, Clinton. I have something to say. Big surprise. When a conductor says stuff like this to me, oh, just saying, I'll follow you. What that means is, follow me. I'm the conductor. However, I found, like, in this show, you said that to us, and it was liberating. because the setup was a little peculiar. Do you have any thoughts or observations about the interesting double listen, I get why it was there, and it was amazing that I think it worked beautifully. Thank goodness that you were at the helm. What was your experience? What are your observations on not being able to see us? Could you even hear us? Any of that?
It's a great question. First of all, I always try to make sure singers feel as though they're in charge, because I think the art is better when a singer feels like they're not being dictated to 100% of the time. So my job as a conductor is to empower people. My job is not to make sound, but rather to create a space for people to give their greatest performance. And that's why I love opera conducting so much. So I always love for singers to feel like they're free to engage in the moment as they need and as they feel compelled. And this was, like you say, the setup was so crazy that it kind of added a layer of necessity to that, aside from an artistic one, such that, you know, the singers out front could only hear the orchestra through monitor speakers, and I could only hear the singers through my speakers, and we had to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So I knew also that no one could really see me because there were teeny tiny monitors of, you know, a distant silhouette of a stick waving at them. And I thought, okay, well, the best thing is for the singers to feel autonomous and for us in the orchestra tent to follow that action. And so we worked that out during the rehearsal process, and it somehow it was pretty seamless, I would say, the final product.
I love it. Was it particular? It was absolutely, and it relied on your ability to follow and listen. I don't know. There's a lot of trust involved, I feel like. Was it particular? We have just as far as the arc of the opera, we haven't really broached the epilogue yet. I don't know, like the final scene, the final ensemble, the chorale, which felt like a particularly prickly. That's coordination of that must have been difficult. As a listener, I wasn't in it. As a listener, it was always coordinated, but I wasn't exactly sure how you all did that. Did you, do you have any, I don't know, this isn't, it's not a question, but like, do you have any insights on, I don't know, that final chorale? Was it like, what was your approach to that? Was it different? I don't know, how'd you get through that? It must have been difficult technically.
You mean from a conducting standpoint? It really
or anything, like any insights on that final chorale if you have any.
Again, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but
wrong.
all of the singers involved in that chorale were on their own. They were autonomous, and they were out there together and could hopefully hear each other, at least breathe to start together. But you know, I think I was kind of along for the ride for a lot of it, and that's the best. When I'm doing my job the best, I think that's what's happening, is that I'm in charge and then you're in charge, and then okay, I need to be in charge now for a moment. Okay, and you're in charge again. So there's this constant conversation
on the stage,
and this conversation was purely me listening. I couldn't see people on stage at all. I couldn't see their body, so I had to really hear how they were going to turn a phrase and know how long they were going to need to breathe. But I think people, when in the ensemble numbers, when people were singing together, I suspect they were doing the same thing. They were watching each other as they could, but listening intently.
Yeah,
Clinton, signing you up for.
I love that, and I love. Say again.
I said we're signing Clinton up for the conductor cloning.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And what I loved, I was at one of the rehearsals I watched when one of the pieces I wasn't in. The singer got a little ahead or a little behind. Probably I don't remember which. Maybe
it was me.
I wasn't gonna say it.
I know. It was me.
No, it was me too. The thing is, it was comforting because I watched Clinton's response. And you felt a little bit of tension in the orchestra, and he just like, it's okay. Somehow you just got the orchestra. You were so calm about it, and you moved like you found each other at the next downbeat, and the orchestra you didn't freak out at all. so the singer was called, and it wasn't like, you know, sometimes you make a mistake. I all the time, especially when I first started, I was getting ahead of you, and I worry about it afterwards. Oh my goodness, I got ahead. And then to watch you deal with that with someone else, like, oh, he doesn't care. He just wants to collect and keep going, and everyone's cool about it. We're gonna find the next album, meet together, and it was super comforting to see the way you responded to things went a little bit sideways. No big deal. We can work it on out.
I appreciate that. I would say baseline, my job is to keep the train on the tracks. And so I get to exist in two different worlds all the time. I get to exist in the present moment, listening and reacting and creating at the same time, but I also am thinking ahead. And where the train kind of veers off the tracks on occasion, my mind goes immediately to what's coming next and how do we sync back up without interrupting the flow of the drama and the sound that we're making at the same time.
Clinton, can I ask you a question? Do you like?
I love it. Well,
you know how we as performers and singers, we lost a bit of our storytelling, so we had to sort of. I mean, I became really cognizant of the way my body was, and aware of a lot of my own sort of limitations as an actor with my body. You know, like I kind of lean on my face a lot, and it made me aware of that pretty starkly. And going forward, I'll have a sort of a different perspective about how I tell stories physically. And do you feel like this experience, having had to conduct sort of like opera karaoke style, you know, where we're in one place and you had to rely solely on a particular skill set that you excel at? I mean, do you feel like that will change the way you conduct in the future, having had this experience?
I think, fortunately, it wasn't an entirely different world to me, because I rely as a conductor so much on my ears anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think some conductors have more of a need to be in constant contact with singers and performers on stage. You know, watch me, watch me, watch me. You know, all know those kind of people. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those kind of people. So I think it felt weird, but it didn't feel, you know, completely abnormal to what I normally do. And honestly, I know that you are all so used to communicating with your face. The one thing it did force me to do was to communicate more with my hands than my face. And I'm sure you all experienced that as well. But so often conductors kind of rely on their face to like make things happen. And instead I had to kind of, you know, you have this thing that covers like most of your face. You have to invent ways to be more expressive.
Well said.
I love it. I'm reminded of, sorry, shoot, I interrupted you. Sorry, Al.
I just said, well said.
Well said. I'm reminded of a story that Sir Ian McKellen told about going to see a Polini concert. He was playing the piano, a Beethoven sonata or something, and he's struck by, is Polini, he thought at the time, is Polini putting the music into the piano, or is Polini taking music out of the piano? And I think it's a fascinating thought, and certainly the way you conduct, you were bringing the music out of us, which was very, very much appreciated, rather than putting it into us, which was very, it's always appreciated, and indeed was necessary, I think, in this production.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's more fun, honestly, as someone in the pit, to listen, and so I get to live all of the singers' performances. Also, I get to live and breathe and die and laugh with them. And if I'm dictating too much of it, then I'm sort of I'm taking the energy in the room. I'm taking rather than allowing and giving. And so that's sort of my philosophy of leadership.
I like it.
That's excellent. I
know a lot of leaders that are takers.
Yeah, it takes a tremendous amount of trust with the people that you are making music with, but that's that's part of the journey.
That was a weird exit Kevin just took. Right? Just was like, right. I know a lot of leaders that are takers.
Hey,
surprise.
Kid emergency or something.
We have all said really excellent things that can be edited in excellent ways. And so now, just to fill up a little bit more time, I encourage us all to say our one little anecdotal experience, something that maybe people don't know that we want to reveal exclusively in this round table. I'll go first. I'm pretty sure I like to overact and push the physicality. And there was one point when I was chasing Daniela around when I would jump up from the ground onto the 4-foot platform, and I did kind of a belly flop. But I only did that up to the final dress because I kind of landed on my suspender clip, and it went right in between my ribs, and I was pretty sure that I had either separated a rib or broken a rib or something. There was just a bruise, though. I never went to the hospital because, like COVID. But I was in pain for the entire run. And that's my little reveal. Anybody else got something?
Ouch.
Yeah, I do. So less to do with during the show and more to do with after the show. My wife and I have a guilty pleasure of getting ice cream cones at McDonald's. And since normally we would hang out with the cast after a show, but this time we certainly could not. So I would just go back home. After one of the performances, I went back and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna surprise Addie. I'm gonna get a couple cones and it's gonna be awesome. And I get there and the guy at the drive-thru gives me this look like I'm crazy or something. And I realized I still have my full face of makeup on. So I look like Wild Greatest Showman, like from your nightmare. And I'm just like, hey, can I have some ice cream? Thanks, bud. So that was a good time. You won't forget that for sure.
Awesome. Cool.
Here's one that has nothing to do with the opera, but there's that whole stress of having to maintain your protocols and safety outside of the opera house. And we had sort of, the housing was challenging to find something that was in town that was within the budget and everything. And so we ended up going to a place where it had internal entrances and an elevator, which was just constantly nerve-wracking. And it was so crazy to have to get on an elevator. We just stopped using the elevator because you would get on and people would just walk on without masks, like totally open face, and like 10 people would try to get on. You're like, no, you can't. Like at one point, there must have been, because I was in a building where they did a lot of corporate rentals. At one point, I had to take the elevator down because I had guitars and all this stuff. And I'm waiting in line, and this party of like 15 people, completely no masks, walks up, and they're sharing air, and I'm like, and they all wanted to get on the elevator with me. And, and I don't like to have confrontations with strangers, and I had to really learn to be like, all right, like either I'm going to wait for the next one or you guys just go on together, but we can't do this, and the constant sort of, the battle that we're all facing in America of, why can't people just wear their masks? Like if we can put a mask over our instrument, which is our complete identity, why can't you wear a mask to get on the elevator or pick up a carburetor at AutoZone or go get a coffee? Like, please. So that was, it's not funny or juicy, but it's like, for me, that was one of the frustrating things. And it really pointed up the sort of division we have in this country with respect to that pandemic.
Amen.
Yeah, creepy, man. I can't even watch like Friends anymore without getting hives because it's like, oh, they're so close and touching each other.
It's a strange world that they're operating in.
Chandler, God dang, son.
I think is my connection. Am I with you guys still? Can you hear me now? Sorry about that, y'all. I thought the last show was kind of fun, and that show because yeah, and the last show we had kind of restage it out of an abundance of caution. I had not had an exposure event per se, but there was a chance that maybe I had been exposed, and so rather than to COVID, so rather than risk it. We restaged the opera. As y'all know, you might have been there. I was in the booth, and that's a little risky. But what was amazing was just sitting in that booth. I was trapped in that booth, and to watch how everyone was able to sort of. Jasmine, you restaged your whole. You and Nathan both restaged your whole scene basically, and it was a real pleasure. And in fact, it was somehow invigorating. It was a big endorphin rush to see how. The show actually, the energy of that show was so good. Alec, you came on and automatically brought me onto the stage, even though somebody else couldn't even see me, maybe. And you're like, hey, there he is. Here's the guy we're looking at. Don't forget to look at him.
I thought you wanted me to do that. I thought you.
From our standpoint, as being on stage with you, it was really great to watch you work in the fly. And I mean that's a testament to the performer that we all know that you are, but the ability that you had to adjust and to change what you were doing to accommodate this new thing. It was really great to watch. And fortunately I got to sit facing backwards a lot, so I got to watch it.
That's right. Well, you're generous to say that, but all y'all, like, it was an inspiration. It was, again, that sort of synergistic thing where everyone just kind of stepped up, and it was it was a pretty full house that night too. So I thought that was a super exciting way to sort of be sent off.
And that's a funny. Super.
Oh no! Oh, you're fine.
Oh, I'll try again. Super way to be sent off. No, I'm kidding. What are you gonna say, Jasmine?
No, it's funny because when we did restage that. I thought there was going to be a set of stairs for me to walk up before I sang my aria, but there wasn't, and I have very, very short legs. So, so I literally had to hide myself up on the stage. I was like, people probably saw, my butt. That's fine. But yeah, that was very memorable. Yeah, and also there was a moment, Mike. I think this was opening night. When your chair flew out of the
yeah, totally did.
And I was trying my best to not lose it. Yeah, that was very memorable. And you stayed in the moment, and it was an incredible experience. So it
was like a chair from a Residence Inn business center just went through the
air. Yeah.
Plastic
Alec
can still contain you.
Yeah. You had stolen that chair from a previous production, right, Alec?
That's it. That was my personal chair that I stole. But hey, Mike, by the way, speaking of your plastic walls, what the heck were you writing, man? Was that Zodiac? All that stuff.
Yeah, we just had the idea that, it just felt kind of plain, sitting in the box. And I kept saying, I want like a whiteboard or something, he's, making calculations. And I knew that this is not a real language. So I actually started just kind of figuring out what kind of language would be unfamiliar to an audience. And I wrote right to left instead of left to right. And then I used symbols, that would have translated to some sort of
they shut him down.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
Cut the connection.
I was watching. He said, "We cannot have him give up our secrets."
Well, cool. I don't know, Kevin.
I have something to say. Big surprise.
Say it.
One thing, if you're balding like I am, you shouldn't turn your head on Zoom calls. Just remember that. So Ullmann, in his essay, the Goethe and Ghetto, said he talked about that Schiller, the sort of annihilating the burden of life with form, and he talked about he compared the transience of what we do with the eternity of how we do it. And like a still life, how you do a painting of a still life, and the flowers will then wilt. The actual flowers will wilt, but the painting itself will live on. And he also mentioned, he said, no one will care years from now that we had no piano to rehearse with, and they will not care that we had no manuscript paper to write on, but they will care about the form that we did. And I think, whereas that's true, we do care about the form we did, that's also fascinating to hear. It's also actually informative to know that they had no piano to rehearse with and no paper to write on. And it makes me think of our production. Like, at the end of the day, I don't know if people are going to remember that we did this in a tent in the middle of a hurricane one night almost, with holes in the tent from the hurricane, on a baseball field off of Peachtree with the subway with MARTA going by. Maybe they won't be interested in that, but I think they'll be interested in the story we told. And I think it was an important story and a seminal story to be told at that point for us as performers and for the community, for the opera community and for Atlanta, frankly.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thanks, man.
Those are excellent closing remarks. Unless anyone has anything else they want to add, I want to say thank you to you all for talking to me again about our experience on this thing that we did just a little bit over 3 months to the day when we started. So it's great to see you all. I hope that we see each other more and soon, as you know, as safety allows.
Love you guys. Miss you guys.
Good to see everybody. Stay
Great to
well.
see everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Be well, guys.
All right.
Thanks for the chat.